The Romans put brains in toothpaste. Your coffee is legally allowed to contain cockroaches. Trust me, this list is full of facts you'll instantly regret learning. Let me tell you more. Cockroach research is nothing to sneeze at. Or maybe it is. Many of these researchers develop cockroach allergies. It has to do with the kind of proteins coming from their bodies. But that's not even the worst part. These poor scientists also get an allergy to something seemingly unrelated. Pre-ground coffee. Why? Because at times, roaches can make their way into coffee piles before they're ground up. And the FDA limits this trace amount to 10%. That sounds like way too much cockroach in my coffee. You might be surprised to learn that, according to your immune system, your eyes don't exist. That's right, your body's most important defense can't even register your eyes. Why? It turns out that if it did detect them, it would send immune cells, the enforcers of the immune system, to attack. And that would pretty quickly cause you to go blind. That's why there's what's known as a blood-ocular barrier. Think of them like cousins who just don't see eye to eye. The Romans had a wide selection of things to use as toothpaste, but the one that sticks out? Ground up mouse brains. The Romans admitted it wasn't scientific, it was more like superstition. And since there were plenty scurrying around, it was an easy ingredient to get a hold of. Still sounds like a tough thing to sell. The Romans also used charcoal, and I'm pretty sure that's actually back in style now. So maybe the new teeth whitening product will be mouse brains? It is cyclical. Now, I don't want to completely scare you, but there could be a silent time bomb ticking away in your head. Ever heard of a brain aneurysm? You probably think there are warning signs to look for. And sometimes that is the case, but more often than not, they come out of the blue. That's because they're a buildup of blood inside a vessel of the brain. Often, there are no symptoms until the aneurysm bursts. Then, worst case scenario, it can cause brain damage, a stroke, or even death. Alright, the scary part's over. The bright side is that getting on top of your blood pressure, not smoking, and being generally healthy can lower your risks. Unfortunately, just like the ground up roaches in coffee, there are other animal traces found in foods too. One of the most common is related to rodents, which are almost impossible to completely eliminate. For every 100 grams of peanut butter, there is an average of one or more rodent hairs. So, anyone for a peanut butter and rat hair sandwich? You wouldn't want to end up in prison overseas. But what if you commit a crime literally over the sea? That's the case for cruise ships. And with thousands of people crammed together day and night, there are bound to be some misbehaving guests. That's why they have jails on board. They're called brigs. The security team on board decides if someone needs to be locked up until they get to land. So, if you're ever on a cruise ship, remember that the security on board is basically the police. Hansel and Gretel is the quintessential fairy tale. An evil stepmother abandons her two kids who have to find their way back home. Oh, and there's a gingerbread house. Why was it there? Well, it goes back to the 14th century, during one of Europe's most desperate times. The Great Famine led to over 7 million people dying. Some resorted to cannibalism, while others abandoned their children. The gingerbread house was a lighter way of showing how desperate people were. Hopefully, they weren't really fattening up kids to cook them. I don't know how you're going to react to this next one, but it's about a sexually transmitted disease called gonorrhea. Symptoms range from mild to severe, but for the longest time, it was treated with antibiotics, which would usually work. Now, though, there's something called super gonorrhea, which honestly sounds like the worst superhero ever. It's super because it's evolved to become resistant to most of the antibiotics we use. I've heard the phrase too much of a good thing, but I never thought it could lead to super gonorrhea. Alcohol is the most widely available drug. Sports, TV, film, books, any part of society is littered with references to drinking the stuff. But what is it actually doing to us? Once the liquid goes down your throat into the stomach, it gets converted into a compound called acetaldehyde. This compound is known to be pretty destructive. It can chip away at the cells in your large intestine, where your rectum is located, the last part of the large intestine before the anal canal. When this is damaged, defenses are down. It can become inflamed, stopping nutrients from being absorbed and leading to cancer. So don't drink your butt off. This next one gives a whole new meaning to health is wealth. Back in medieval times, people were experimenting with all types of potions for health. One of the ingredients they tried? Gold. I mean, think about it. Gold is pure, gold is shiny. Humans have valued gold for millennia. That's why around the 14th century, physicians would tell their patients to drink aurum potable, basically a crushed up liquid gold. I guess it's not that different from that Salt Bay guy wrapping a steak in gold for thousands of dollars. The practice fell out of fashion with the scientific revolution. Otherwise, we might still have gold supplements. Nothing beats the feeling of a good night's sleep. Among other things, it's been shown to boost your mood, creativity, and stress. But did you know that believing you had a good sleep can be enough? This is the strange phenomenon known as placebo sleep. Researchers found that participants who were told they had better sleep were more likely to perform better on tests. So, believing something enough makes it true? Is all that manifestation stuff actually real? Feeling confused? A loss of memory? Slurring your speech? Unless you have taken some kind of drug, you might want to get that checked out. These are some of the symptoms of prion disease. These have to do with proteins in the brain folding in the incorrect way. Alright, to be honest, I didn't even know proteins were folding, but it turns out this folding is pretty important. Folding the wrong way can kill brain cells, literally making holes in the brain. This is exactly what happens in prion disease, which can affect humans and other animals, like in mad cow disease. You can get it from eating contaminated meat, contaminated surgical tools, or just bad luck in the genetic lottery. Once you have it, though, sadly, there is no cure. Touch one of those display skeletons used in school, and the bones are completely dry. But in reality, while they're inside our body, bones are incredibly wet. Blood is constantly pumping, not just around, but through them. On the inside, where the marrow lives, it's like jelly. Plus, they're coated in a layer of wet membrane which protects the bone. So, where on earth does that expression dry as a bone come from? Speaking of ancient Rome, which I did a few numbers ago, but anyway, I digress, the Roman general Marcus Crassus had a brutal way of running his team of firefighters. When there was a fire, they would respond as usual, but Crassus would always be there with them. Why? He told the building owners he would only put out the fire if they sold the property on the spot, and for a dirt cheap price. With no choice, they would often agree. This was partly how he built his wealth to what would today be around $16 billion. Truly, a self-made man. Ever been so angry that it felt like your blood was boiling? Well, then you should probably keep your feet on the ground. Because at about 63,000 feet up in the air, well, the air is extremely thin compared to here on the ground. And when the atmospheric pressure is much lower, something funny happens to liquids. They boil at much lower temperatures. That would mean that even your normal body temperature would be enough to boil your blood without any protection. Fighter jets do sometimes reach these heights, but luckily they're equipped with all the protective gear needed to shield themselves from overcooking. At the dentist, you open your mouth wide and say, "Ah." Well, for some people in extremely rare scenarios, the dentist might not be looking in their mouth at all. Ectopic eruption is when teeth grow in unusual locations away from the mouth. These can be in places like the cheek, the jaw joint, or even the nose, eye socket, or brain, which is usually a tumor called a teratoma. Usually it's pretty dangerous too. Alright, I'll never complain about the dentist again. There is nothing more annoying than a paper cut. Alright, maybe there are, but hear me out. It always happens when you least expect it. Thankfully, they usually heal within days. But what if you somehow manage to get one in your eye? Firstly, what the hell were you doing? Secondly, bad news. The damage done might be forever. The cut could get infected, the cornea could get scarred, or you could develop dry eye. All of this can cause serious, permanent damage. And maybe you should be wearing goggles while handling paper. Just saying. Tunicate sea squirts look like a bunch of plastic tubes swaying in the water. But what's strange about these is how they age. Just how fun it is to say their name. Go ahead, tunicate sea squirts. After being born, they enter the larva stage, swimming around with a nerve cord and brain, just like us. Unlike us, when they settle down for their next stage, they don't have use for their brain anymore. So, what do? Well, they absorb it, taking all the nutrients with it. I guess the human equivalent would be finding a nice comfy couch and letting your brain melt away. And you know what? That's actually kind of what we do, isn't it? It's only women who experience that time of the month. But if you were a man living in Egypt 100 years ago, something was happening that made the country think men were going through the same thing. Men suddenly began peeing blood, with pain in the stomach and headaches similar to how women did. In dozens of rural towns, almost 2 out of every 3 men were experiencing these symptoms. So what was really going on? Were they menstruating? No, but something was wrong. They were suffering from a parasitic infection called schistosomiasis. The disease can cause organ damage and seizures. Good thing the Egyptian government rolled out a nationwide campaign to get rid of the disease, and by 2010, only 29 villages had a rate of over 3%. Our world's water supplies are thoroughly polluted by microplastics. And while you might have heard of microplastics in dust, paint, or even cosmetics, those aren't the worst offenders. That title belongs to something much closer to all of us. Our clothes. Since clothing has been made with cheap materials like polyester and nylon, microscopic pieces of plastic fibers have been shedding into the water. With every load of washing, hundreds of thousands of these are chipped off, swirling down the drain, and damaging the environment. Or they can find their way back into our food, which is probably why over 3 in 4 of us have microplastics in our blood. Now, was it worth it to get all that workout gear and sports shirts? There's nothing more special to a mother than their child. But the child has a special place in the mother's heart too. Literally. When a fetus is growing inside a mother's womb, it is sending something back up to the mother. Fetal cells. These travel through the placenta and are absorbed into the mother's bloodstream. Some of these are stem cells. Stem cells are among the most powerful cells in the human body. They can turn into any kind of cell in muscles, blood, bones, or even the heart. And so, if a mother's heart is damaged, it's possible for a fetus to repair it. In case you need a reason to get into recycling, think about this. It's literally raining plastic. Plastic products have decomposed and microplastics have been swept into the ocean. But that's not the end of their journey. When these tiny microplastics are light enough, they can be carried by wind or the force of waves into the air. And through something called atmospheric transport, they spread all around the world and pop up in raindrops that fall back down to the ground. Does that mean my old water bottle is going to fall on my head one day? Oh. People worry about the cleanliness of public toilets, but there are places you sit that might be even dirtier, and you never even consider them. Take the movie theater. Just to think about how many people use those seats throughout the year. Probably thousands. Not worried yet? Well, how about this? Bed bugs can actually survive inside these seats. The environment is perfect for them. Warm and dark, and very rarely with a protective layer like a bed sheet. So the next time you're in a cinema, try not to think about the tiny bed bugs that might be crawling all over you. Vanilla flavoring usually comes from vanilla extract, but not always. Something called castoreum has been used. Castoreum is something produced inside beavers in their castor sac, near their anal glands to be precise. For beavers, it's mixed with urine to spray out onto the ground and mark their territory. And at some point, someone figured out that it has a similar scent to vanilla. It was used in fragrances and medicines going back thousands of years, which in the 19th century almost wiped out the entire North American beaver population. Castoreum is rarely used today. It's actually too labor-intensive to get. And plus, it comes from a beaver's butt. Waking up in a hospital gown after surgery has to be one of the strangest experiences. But I'd take anesthetic surgery over what our ancestors went through. If you had a bad head injury or suffered from seizures, chances are you would be given what's called a trepanation. Basically, it meant cracking a pointy rock into your head to dig a hole. Researchers have found many skulls of people who were subjected to the procedure, with some showing evidence of surviving, although I'm not sure how much fun living with a hole in your head would be. Well, if I've completely grossed you out, my job is done here. But that doesn't mean I'm finished. First, I have a question. Which was the biggest spreader of the Black Death? A. Direct human contact. B. Fleas on rats. C. Infected water supplies. Or D. Contaminated food. Let me know your answers in the comments below. And if you're still in the mood for some facts, well, I've got just the thing. From a prophecy that threw Europe into darkness to how plants are actually conscious of being eaten, click here to watch 25 short facts that'll turn your life upside down. And as always, Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all that fun stuff. Social medias, follow me, do everything, and I'll catch you guys next time. Really helps the channel. I mean it. We don't just YouTubers, we don't just say it for the funsies. See ya.